Hello, hello. I'm Bob Duffy from Intel, and this is Between Two Bytes. And as always, I'm joined by the ever effervescent Captain Geek himself, Eric Mantion. And we're going to discover and explore the backstories and inspirations of game developers, creators, and master coders. And in this very first episode, we're talking with some OG coders. Lee Bamber from the Game Creators, Mike Kasprzak of Ludum Dare. So we're going to rewind, reminisce about the 80s and 90s and what was it like to start building games back then, and hopefully touch on how it relates to today so that you new game developers can understand from these guys how it was done. But anyways, let's spin this logo and let's introduce our guests. So they're coming. They're here. Lee Bamber, Mike Kasprzak, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we should, Lee, Mike, each say your name so people know which one's which.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Lee.
There we go.
Very good. Hey, I've got some questions for you guys. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. I hope it's cool. It's up to you guys to make it cool. But I want to first talk about how you know us. You are both Intel software innovators in our program, and I think I met both of you guys about 10 years ago. Mike, I can remember the very moment. I was invited to a dinner. You were there. Gina Bovera introduced me to you, and you were the winner of a contest. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what did you win?
Sure. So way back, what feels like a million years ago now, I took part in Intel was running a contest for a platform that they had created called App Up, and it was to basically make games and software for these little netbook computers.
Yeah.
And they ran a contest, and the top prizes were smart cars, oddly enough, and I happened to win one of those. So that's pretty sweet.
You won a car from Intel.
I won a
still
car.
have it?
I do actually.
still
Yeah,
have-
I've been doing some tweaking to it lately. I've been afraid to really touch anything, change anything, but it's 10 years old now, and I'm a little more confident. Like, okay, let's see if we can make it more improved for hopefully another 10 years.
Well, I tell
Both in third grade.
you posted that on Twitter because you're doing some kind of cool AV stuff in it, and it looks like you never took it out of the wrapper. I mean, it looks really cool.
Yeah, no, admittedly, I before winning the car, I did not have a car, and I didn't. Well, I'm in a situation that I'm able to like walk to a lot of places, so I didn't really necessarily need it for what I was doing. But obviously, it made things so much more convenient. And yeah, no, something about the cars that at least mine still looks very new, like a brand new toy car or something. It's,
Yeah, it does. It does. And Lee, I think I met you around the same time. I can't pinpoint the moment, but I'm going to guess a pub was involved.
Yes, without going into horrid details,
Right.
it would have involved Guinness at some point. Yes.
Probably.
I feel like that's another category of safest predictions ever.
Same as yeah, it was around the same time with App Up. You guys were creating games. The game creators. I think you might have created the very first game for Migo. If anybody knows what the Migo OS was, look it up. Use your Google.
Yeah.
The soccer game, right?
It's funny that Mike recalls winning a car. We won a car as well. In fact, my development director was on stage at the IDF conference accepting this huge wooden key, like this massive wooden key. It's
Right.
like, we're from the UK. I mean, we're going to have to get this car halfway around the world. So we thought, is there a second version of the prize? It says, well, we can give you the monetary value of it, which for a struggling developer is much needed. So yeah, it was a
Okay,
great experience.
You took the
It was
money.
a football game. Yeah, and it was great working on new tech, but it's a pity it did take off.
Yeah,
It was a fun project.
Great events. I'll say that. So we had a lot of fun with that. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how you started in game development. So maybe you could, roll us back to when you guys were kids or when you first started thinking about it or first started to write your first game. I mean, what inspired you? What got you into wanting to become a game developer? Either
Mike, do you want to kick off?
I could, yeah. I remember for me, like as soon as I discovered video games, like I was sold. Like this is something that I just was like I totally fell in love with and I was obsessed with. And I kind of found myself like just thinking about games when I couldn't play them, and just classic obsessive stuff. And I know for me, I got a prop even. I started on one of these. Which is yeah.
Oh, we still got it.
I got my original Commodore 64 that my folks bought a long time ago. Like there's kind of two models. Like there's one that's a bit more round. This one's got some edges on it. But this is my first PC from like well over 30 some years ago, maybe 35, 34 years ago.
Right.
It still works.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Awesome.
What about you?
I want a Pro. In fact, I want that Pro.
Right, me
We all
too.
do.
We want it.
I lost all my computers. All mine disappeared. I think in attics. They've all disappeared. All mine.
Yeah, there are lots of
Yeah,
attic-
mine started off. I didn't have a computer at the beginning. My uncle did. He had the computer, and I would just look over the shoulder and watch him play games and create stuff. And I kind of was hooked before I even had a computer. And then eventually, after enough whinging, I got a Christmas present. The only Christmas present, because they were so expensive back then. It says, and I already knew what it was. It's like, we're only going to give you one present this Christmas. And there it was. And I could see it shaped in the size of the box. I knew what it was, and I was happy. I mean, that was 1 million toys all in one box. So that's my first introduction to computers. It was thanks to my uncle.
Yeah.
So
What kind of computer was it?
It
oh,
was.
I can trump you on that just by one, Mike. It was the Commodore VIC-20.
Yes.
Nice.
So
Ooh.
it's the one with 3.5 kilobytes.
Yeah, kilobytes, right?
Total.
You can
You gotta
upgrade
do
it
the
to
piggy
8K.
3.5 kilobytes.
Right. Right.
Kilobytes.
Yeah, no, me too.
Yes.
That was it for me. I had a job in high school, so they didn't offer any computer classes way back then in the 80s. Right? So I was missing out on people taking computer classes, doing the Apple IIs and writing programs and all that kind of stuff. So, but since I had some money, because I actually had a job, I bought a Commodore VIC-20. So I got it with the tape drive. I bought the upgrade to 8K. I learned BASIC,
Ooh.
right? And so, yeah, I challenged myself. Whatever they were doing in the classes, I was going to be able to figure out on my own. So it was a lot of fun.
See, right now I feel inspired. We need to do a parody of Dr. Evil where he goes to sleep for 20 years, but he's in the tech industry, right? So he comes back as the tech CEO and he said, I'm going to make a computer with 1,000 kilobyte hard drive, right? And they're all like, actually, not so much
And it's
more.
like, no.
Right? Yeah, yeah. Well, it was fun. Those were the good old days where the lines were numbered. Every
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, have 16 colors.
Yeah.
What?
Wow, 16. That's a lot.
Mhm.
So was there a game that you guys played that was like, okay, that's what inspired me, or was it just games in general that suddenly people were getting access to in their homes?
I'll just feel this one because it's just floated in my head just then. It was a
Right.
game called Amok. Now, these aren't games like people think of games of today. It's basically a small screen with big blocks of different colors that move around. And so the green block is maybe the aliens, and the blue block is kind of the player, and the gray blocks is the walls, and you just move around and try not to get eaten by the green blobs. That's it. That was the game. It was called Amok. It cost £1.99, £1.99 in a cassette from W.H. Smith's. So, that was probably my first game.
I feel like that's just a video game version of Tag.
It is. The early games, they were just inspired by, the weirdos
world.
that were creating games at the time.
Yeah.
Usually loners with nothing better to do than to create these. They probably created it in like a day. It actually took longer to actually put it on the cassette and distribute it than to write it.
Right.
It took 1 day to write and a week to sell it.
Right.
Oh man, tapes were so slow, man.
Oh, and super reliable. Do you remember how reliable they were?
Well,
No.
the tapes you had to
Reliability
keep
is not what tapes are.
you had to keep a notebook of where your programs were on the tape, right? So it's like, 015 was where this game was, and then you'd fast forward to wherever the other one was. So yeah, I just had notebooks filled of where games were on cassettes, or programs.
I remember one of my early favorite gaming experiences was the Atari game tanks.
Yeah.
And then you figured out that if you drove your tank up to a certain corner in just the right way and you turned it in just the right angle, you could pop yourself off the map and come in on the other side and surprise your opponent. And I was like, to me, that feels like the very first Easter egg in all the video games I've ever played, was this like glitch in the thing in the Matrix where you could pop over to the other side. And then, my younger brothers were like, how'd you do that? Like, I'll never tell. So.
Oh, that's your secret weapon.
That was
that's
your secret.
You
How do you do that?
Right?
Yeah.
You could curve bullets in tanks.
You had something called the interstellar.
Well, they bounce.
Yeah, did it bounce off the wall?
You could bounce and you could
Bounce off the
curve them.
walls.
So somebody could be, hiding behind something, right? And if you're really good at curving, they can be hiding and protected. You could just curve it right around it and boom.
Oh, yeah. No, I loved one of my first early games. Yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. All right, so do you think, you guys were inspired by games and obviously to become game developers. Do you think that that's the same thing today? Is that what's driving your, game developers? You play something like Cyberpunk and it's like, yes, I want to do this.
Mm-hmm. Like, I definitely think it's anyone that gets into games played something that just made them go, I love this, or I want more. I want to know how this, how the sausage is made, which is a terrible metaphor, but whatever, for some reason that always comes to mind. But just wanting to know more about these things and diving into it, and
there's so much more games, right?
What happens is when you play games, at least for me, I play them and I finish them. And back in the day, you only had 3 games in your collection, so you just play them again. But after a while, you think, wouldn't it be great if ... And you start having your own idea about, it'd be great if I could do that. I think that was one of the drivers. It wasn't just playing the games and just copying the games. The games let you get inspired about, oh my God, that's great, but I could do these things. And because then you had these skills, because you knew these were all created by whatever, the computer in front of you, I could create that. If you've played a game on that computer, you know that you can create that game as well. You just need to have all the right skills and the time. So you can say, well, I'll make my own game. But, you're not stealing the idea. You're just being inspired by the idea and then taking it to that next level and injecting some of your own personal self into it, that creative process. So I think that's what it is. I think everyone, even today, people start by playing games and get inspired about those games, and then eventually the creative sparky ones then go off and say, right, well, I'm going to do my own version of it, or I'm going to do something different. So I think it all starts off with people playing games. I'd be very surprised if someone started off programming games without not interested in playing them. I don't see how that could work.
See, I think that is actually an entirely almost separate subsection of the world of game development, right? The thing you're talking about there, it has a name for it, mods. Right, and there's a long history of amazing games, right? Everyone knows one of the most popular games in the world is League of Legends, but it's a MOBA, and the first MOBA was actually just a mod inside of Warcraft 3. So the guy played the Warcraft, and Blizzard was smart enough to have an environment that people could play around with and modify. And so this guy, IceFrog and whatnot, creates the Dota inside of Warcraft 3 that was just almost a completely different game, right? Same assets and whatnot. And that mod inspires League of Legends, which then proceeds to become the most popular PC game in the world. And then multiple other MOBAs come on after that. But the origin story is the guy made a mod, right? And so I think that's what, kind of almost a specific subsection of this is people can get into mods, which is almost an accelerated track into developing a new game. And then they can start doing their own game with a different game engine or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, it seems...
Which actually kind of brings us something that's... I got another prop, actually.
Long time ago.
Yeah, we got... a long time ago, used to be able to buy books with, little game source code in them. I probably can't read it. It's a little bit low detail. But used to be able to buy these books. And, this is a perfect example of modding. You can say, type the program in, and you run it. And then you go back and say, oh, you know what? Let's change the number of lives here. Or let's make the enemy a little bit bigger or whatnot. It was this is how a lot of us back in the day would have learned how to program just by taking these programs and like you described, modding them. Of course, obviously, Dota is a much more extravagant mod than say, I think this one here is a word game where you have to. No, this one's actually you have to chase the ghost and you're a little star that moves around. So I guess you can change yourself into a heart.
Well, I think
In fact, do you
for
want to stretch
some
the analogy?
portion.
I think.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Bob. Go ahead.
Eric. I was just saying, if you stretch the analogy right to the beginning, the moment we stopped writing in assembly, right, at machine code level, we were basically modding. The moment we were sitting on something else that someone else created, we're a modder. And you can take that analogy all the way to the top, where I create game creation software these days. And I am not kidding. Someone bought my software, loaded one of the example games, compiled it as an executable, and then sold it on Steam. Literally just took the sample game and stuck it on Steam and started selling it. I mean, the ultimate mod, where they don't literally do anything except press 5 buttons, and they probably made more money from that game than he's selling the tool.
That seems a little fishy.
Like a stack, with nobody does the ground floor stuff anymore, and everyone just sits on top, sitting on the shoulders of giants. And I think modding is a perfectly valid practice. We do learn from our predecessors, and we build on what they've struggled to create. So I think modding is definitely the way to go for modern developers, because it's all around them. I would not dream to suggest that someone start learning assembly, because it will take them 15 years to maybe get a sprite on the screen. So,
Right.
Yeah, I think modding is the future. Yeah, definitely.
I was waiting for the twist in the story, Lee, when you ended, and that young guy's name was Elon Musk. But I guess that's what that was.
No. Well, speaking of what Mike was talking about is, that's how I learned too. Is you would get these magazines and there would be sample code in them, and you'd write, right? Because there was nothing to download. You had to go through painlessly and write everything. And if you missed something, so you learned about debugging, etc., mistakes in your code, and finally, maybe like a week later, it finally worked, right? And all the hours of coding in there, and then you got to do it, and you just see a little character. Beep,
and of course, you'd lose your code all the time as well, because that was a joke earlier, just in case anyone didn't catch it. Tape drives weren't reliable. They were famously unreliable. You'd spend 4 hours writing a 200-line program carefully, save it to your tape, wake up the next day, load it in, and it's just spaghetti gobbledygook. And that is what you've got, and they've got to start again. It's quicker to write it from scratch to try and correct it.
I feel obligated to remind our wonderful guests and our hosts that this is a broad program, and there's going to be some portion of the population to whom we are addressing who's never even touched a floppy drive, and they're mystified. They don't even A, know what a cassette is, right? They've never seen one on, and B, they were like, "Isn't that for music? What are you talking about? Computer software? That's not a thing." It was a thing. Just.
Do you have any
tape drive?
Yeah, tape drive.
You want to go get one?
Yeah, you have a tape drive. Yeah.
I do actually. Just give me a moment.
Okay. Mike's gonna get his tape drive.
Like one great example, right? Is I remember when you wrote something to a 5 1/4 inch floppy, right? And kind of like what Lee was saying, you spent all this time and effort, you wrote it in, and now you were like, okay, don't go bad. And you would put a little piece of tape, a little electrical tape on the corner to keep the tape from being, the drive from being written over. So yeah, there's all kinds of weird things that.
Do you have a cassette, Mike? Do you have a cassette? Explain what you would do in order to make it kind of write protected.
It was within reach. This guy has a cassette.
Well, when the podcast's over, he's going to go back to playing a game on that. That's what he's going to do. Hey, Mike, show us the interface. Show us the other end of the cable.
Oh, is that what is it? SCSI? Is it? No, it would be serial. What is it? What do we have here?
I believe it's a serial connector of some sort.
Old serial. Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. That's
definitely
fun.
not USB.
No.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Mike's got all the show and tell. I always thought Mike was Batman, right? He just seems to have everything, all the tools and the gadgets.
Do you need shark repellent? That's over here.
Shark repellent, perfect. Well, you guys, did everybody learn BASIC? Was BASIC your first programming language?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was. The best part was, of course, with the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64, is when you switched the computer on, you was already in the programming editor. The first thing you were encouraged to do is program. You could write a program right there. As soon as the computer came on, 20 seconds later, you could have written a program and have it run. That really was helpful for our generation, who we did coding before we did tools, because there wasn't enough memory to have a tool on the computer at the same time as the operating system. So if we wanted a tool, we'd basically have to write it ourselves. Then we could use the tool in order to create all the other stuff that we needed. There's usually not enough room. Even on the Commodore 64, it was a bit of a fight to figure out what resources you could have at any one time. So yeah, it basically popped up, and there it was, BASIC. I have a screenshot. See all my artifacts that I can bring out. I sent to Bob digitally. See, I'm a child of the future, so I can't actually show it to you with my hands. But there's a screenshot.
If you imagine something happened in post, and now all of Lee's images are coming on the.
So Lee, you need to send it to Mike. Mike, put it on a cassette, and then FedEx the cassette over to Bob.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
That was another thing as well. There was no internet, so of course, it was mail. It was send everything by mail. You know, if you wanted something, you had to come in a little jiffy bag through your front door, hopefully without viruses on it.
Well, so what do you guys program in today? Nobody's programming in BASIC, I'm sure, these days, if even you can. What are you programming in, Mike? What's your preference?
It's kind of a toss-up. It's either when I'm doing like serious game development stuff, it's going to be C++, or bit of a C, bit of C++, kind of back and forth there. But I'm also quite fond of JavaScript, actually, just because it's very well. You basically, when you build something that's for the web, you just got to send somebody a link, and then they can start using it right away. And I think that's kind of important these days.
Yeah, I'm C++ as well. And maybe it's a religion, but I think if you can do C++, you can get a job anywhere. I mean, it basically gives you the control. It gives you the responsibility. You're going to get it wrong a lot, and you're going to do a lot of crashes, but you also have that control. And if you can master C++, you can turn your hand to pretty much anything else. I wouldn't suggest people just start day one in C++. There's lots of nice step-up languages which just ease you into it with a lot of safety buffer. But if you want to kind of go out and get a job as a hardcore primary programmer, C++ is a great thing to have in your toolbox. I'm sure Mike is in a similar boat where at this stage we probably have gone through so many languages we kind of start forgetting stuff we've learned. I even used to do things like Fortran and COBOL. I mean, these things were like industrial programming languages that teachers were telling me, this is what you're going to need. You're going to need to know COBOL.
Pascal.
Yeah.
Turbo Pascal.
Yeah. It was supposed to be for like serious databases and interfaces. I found the color commands in Pascal. So all my screens were like beautiful animations and things zooming in from the left and right. And my teacher saying, "Oh, that's flash trash. You'll never get a job doing flash trash." I thought, okay, yes, okay. So yeah, I was basically beaten down for any kind of color in my Pascal apps, but it was all part of the journey. And then after a while, what you find is after, say, 10 languages, you can pick up another language very quickly. It's sort of the same sort of idea. You just have to figure out syntax and methodologies. But yeah. Basic.
Lee, I want to go back to something, right? You said C++ is very good. You mentioned that, in your opinion, there were a few step-up languages. What do you think those are today? What's the crawl, walk, run before you get to sprinting at C++?
I'll go in reverse order. Let's start with C++, which is your destination. I think C#, sort of to step back one, is nice because it protects you a little bit in terms of allocating memory and releasing that later, which usually gets you into trouble, and managing pointers better. So C# is a nice place to be before you jump into C++. Going back earlier, and I have to be a little bit sort of personal in the sense that I would have said you start off at BASIC and then go through basic style programming languages, and then maybe like a script, something like Lua, and then onto C# and then C++. So you're eventually getting out of safe waters into deep waters, but that's where you get all the power and the complexity and the speed that you're going to want if you want full control of the computer. So that's kind of the path I'd dictate. But Mike, you probably have a lot more experience with seeing a lot of developers and their paths. I might be talking old school rubbish. So what is the modern take on the path from I like to make games all the way through to I've got a job making games?
I think today's very different for sure. Like I've seen people that have like literally started with Unity or C# basically, and that was the first language they learned, and then they figured it out and went from there. I know me personally, I'm rather fond of JavaScript, and JavaScript doesn't get enough respect, I think, from us older folk, because it's like Java kind of tainted the word Java for us, but I kind of like it because you can do some really like hacky stuff with it, which kind of gets, certain modern languages like to be very strict about how they do things, and JavaScript's like, yeah, whatever. They just give some commands in and you'll figure it out. It's also got some stuff that
I don't even think it says whatever. I think it just says whatever.
Well, you don't have to declare variables. What is this? It's just
very
JavaScript. I think JavaScript's too powerful sometimes, because the great thing about JavaScript, you can have a JavaScript that writes JavaScript and then can run itself. So you can have a program that writes another program. And then it'll run that, and that program might write another program. It's like, what the hell? I mean, now the JavaScript is basically going off and evolving into this form of life.
I think we just confirmed that JavaScript is the language behind Skynet, is what we just discovered here. Right.
Yeah.
Right. We need to stop JavaScript, but it's as powerful as C++ for mostly everything. The syntax has the same kind of power as C++, with the added bonus, it's cross-platform, so it literally just runs anywhere you like. I had to actually convert an entire compiler and game engine to JavaScript just because I needed it cross-platform. And it's possible. It was basically a good mapping from C++ all the way to JavaScript. It was just, there's other problems when you start working within the cloud. And no, you're not on a local computer anymore with instant access to big resources. You're waiting for servers to catch up with what it is you want to do.
Yeah, I really liked a lot of JavaScript, and so I got back into it when Intel had the XDK, and it just made everything so much easier. It created that wrapper that you could have, so you could execute it on really anything, a phone, inside Facebook, or desktop application, and I miss that. I mean, I picked up React and Electron.js, and just wasn't the same. Just not the same. So
there's a lot of history in JavaScript, isn't there? There's a lot of this information out there, and it's been proven. It's basically what everything is sitting on right now. You're literally sitting on JavaScript. So, it's sort of like the language you've always wanted, where you write once and deploy everywhere. We've had it for years and years. It's called JavaScript.
It's called JavaScript. Yeah, it is. It's excellent. Well, I'm surprised nobody mentioned Logo. that was a language back in the day to learn, right? That's your first step.
You want to move it.
It was like a weird calculator more than anything. It's like, move over here.
Right. It's a great way to learn what programming is.
Yeah, if you think about how you learn, I mean, the first thing, the concept you learn in programming is sequential instructions. Do this, then this, then this, then this. That's all it's glorified. List of how to make a cup of tea.
Move 10, turn 90, right? It's just, so you could draw with it. So it's great. But also, I'm surprised you guys didn't mention Python, which seems to be what all the kids are learning today. So if you're in, computer engineering, it seems like Python is the start, because it's pretty powerful. It's a scripting language. It's kind of your entree into artificial intelligence and data science as well. Sure. It's not much in gaming. As much, but just from a coding.
What happens is, I think you diverge. I think what happens is you start off and everyone's just a general developer and you're into games and stuff. But now the industry is so mature, you actually you go off and specialize. You do a certain thing. And you either go off and you do C++ and super fast games engines and all that kind of thing, or you go off and you do UI for websites and stuff like that, and you get really good at that. I'm sure there's still sort of this Renaissance man who kind of knows everything.
Right,
like a jack of all trades situation.
That's you, Lee.
No, not at all. No, I struggle just to do one thing. But what you find is you specialize. You make that your proficient set, and you get very good at it. And unfortunately, that means you have to then downplay investigating all these other channels, because there's now so many directions you can go in. It takes 10 lifetimes to master everything. So I think you specialize as you go on.
So, as you guys have gone along, just shifting from the development languages, just in terms of having this as a career, what's been challenging? If you had to talk to game developers and give them advice, I mean, what's the challenging thing about being a game developer?
Do you want to field that one? You've seen a lot of success stories. and not
Well,
so
actually,
success stories.
actually, to lead Mike in a little bit, though,
Sure.
if anyone didn't know, Mike runs the world's largest online game jam called Ludum there. So when we throw it over to Mike, it's not just his personal experience, but he's run, I want to say dozens. Mike, stop me if I'm getting the number wrong, but I felt like I saw the number 32. It might not be exactly, but multiple game jams, hundreds probably over the years, hundreds of entries and whatnot. So he has a great, connection with the young indie game developers. So he's pulling from that knowledge. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no pressure. But,
No, he knows the world. Listen to our Lord, Mike. Yes, no pressure.
Yeah. We've run a lot of events, I guess, or I should say I've run a lot of events. Like we're basically, our next upcoming event is our 48th major event. Woo! We've done some minor events along the way, but 48 is kind of a significant number for us because our event runs typically for 48 hours. So it's like, hey, wow, the 48th event, we used to joke about how when we finally reached that point. But I would say one thing that's probably challenging and I think for most people is just, I guess, understanding that you can start, which is kind of an odd thing to do, which we kind of help people understand that they can just make a game. Like I remember, I've heard this mentioned for like comic books and whatnot, is that you grow up, you read comics and whatnot, and you're like, you don't imagine that you would ever, be able to do this yourself. Like you need some sort of special permission to do this. And I think the hard part for people is like the initial hard part is like, hey, what's who I need someone's permission to let me make games because I think this is cool. And I think that's something that we've certainly improved over the years is just like by showcasing how one makes games. It's like you just do this and this, and it's like, oh, I can do that. And then suddenly you start tumbling down this rabbit hole of cool game making fun stuff. I realize that's not exactly what's hard, but I know it can be tricky to at least kind of get the motivation or to convince yourself to start. Yeah. Like once you really get into it, like I like something might have seemed difficult like when I first started, but like after spending time with it, it's like, oh, that's simple. This is just this and this, and you kind of build on layers of like something that was hard is now easy. So you do something even harder on top of that, and then that becomes easy too. And then I suppose the thing that really is difficult is managing all these little pieces at the same time. That becomes the hard part rather than the individual components for like, how do I get a sprite on screen? How do I play a sound effect? Once you know all these things, the hard part is then, okay, let's make them work together in a symphony and do something cool.
Yeah, it's right, isn't it? Like challenges don't last. You'll have a challenge and then you'll overcome it. Then, lo and behold, there's another challenge ready to ambush you. And then you have to solve that one. So, challenges, yes, but challenges isn't a bad thing. That's just telling you where you're going to go next. A challenge, in my vocabulary, is a good word. It means there's possibilities, there's opportunities to come up with an answer to that challenging situation that no one's thought of before. That way I can express, look, well, that idea I've come up with, and it kind of works too. So I think challenge is a good thing. For me personally, my challenge, and I'll have had many as I was learning all the stuff, and still have today, really, is ambition. I'll have a great idea, but I was primarily a lone wolf programmer. I just did everything myself, graphics, sound, coding, selling, everything, like a one-man band. You have the 15 instruments strapped to you, and as you move around and you're playing, that was my identity, right? But I still have these massive ideas, like what if we could do this great thing? And I'd try and do it, and I'd ultimately fall short of the vision because I was one person. And later on, I found out the solution to that is teams. Find people who are good in these separate disciplines, bring them together. And that vision is then really easy to do. You don't have to do it yourself. That was my personal success story for challenge. It was the biggest one.
Listen to Captain Planet over there. By your powers combined.
It's true, though. And, it took 30 years for me to realize that. It was obvious.
Just one thing, just because when Mike was talking earlier, Eric, you took a sip of coffee, and we just have to bring that back in frame because it was just so...
Yeah, that's not a camera trick.
It's small, right?
That's the actual size next to his head.
Well, they say never drink anything bigger than your head, so I had to measure. Yeah, it's just smaller than my head. Because I have a big head.
This is compared to a normal size cup, right?
Right.
No branding required.
Well, yeah, but see, but Lee, what you have there is what they call a civilian coffee mug, and this is a military coffee mug. So that's
I don't know if you guys remember that.
the APA show.
Like,
Nice.
Eric's got level 10.
You know,
I'm not promoting myself.
Lee, I think you stuck onto something. Is the challenges, right, are kind of what they feed developers. I think the reason you get into game development is because there's this godlike moment. I'm creating worlds. I'm moving a character. You're bringing things to life, and there's this constant struggle of it not working, which brings you down, and then it works, and then there's such a rush for that, and so.
Yeah.
So you get into that kind of loop in that feed, and I think that kind of feeds into the problem of the ambition, because when you're thinking about it like as a business and actually getting a game out there, you can get caught up into that loop of, well, I'm kind of feeding the endorphins of just coding and not focusing on what you need in order to actually be successful in terms of creating a game. So I think they kind of go hand in hand.
I have a T-shirt, and I actually got a couple of nice glances from the opposite sex when I went to the last conference I went to, and it reads, "I hate programming. I hate programming. I hate programming. Oh my God, it works! I love programming." And that just
Nice.
sums it up. It really sums it up.
Oh,
Right. All sorts of frustration, and then whoa, yeah, look at that! Look what I did! I am so proud of myself. You're the worst developer, and then the best developer in about 5 minutes.
And that's really that. I mean, that keeps me going. Just that, even without all the trimmings, without all the other great things that you get into when you're into the industry, just that thing, that simple joy of cracking a problem, of figuring it out,
Right.
And that you that did it. I mean, it's quite addictive.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit to our current situation. So at the recording of this, if somebody's watching this in the future, this is the beginning of 2021, and we're getting through.
in the future. Ooh.
We're in the middle of a pandemic, and so developers are communal people, and I think one of the reasons that Eric and I just really connect with you guys, and essentially everybody in the Innovator program, is we all like to get together. We like to go to events, game conferences, and while Mike's been doing them virtually for a long time, there's still the sense that you just have to get connected to other people who are in this profession. So what has this year been like without being able to do that?
Mike, do you want to do that one? Because
Sure.
my answer won't be pulling the party line at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, last year, we're in 2021 now, but I know for us, we saw we were suddenly the experts because we've been running Ludum Dare as an online event pretty much since its inception. And that was like 19 years ago April. So, so we're the experts at this. And, I'm getting a lot of people reaching out to me suddenly. We're getting a lot of attention. And, out of nowhere, we go from kind of we kind of hit our stride, doing like regular, consistent, let's say, between 2,000 and 3,000 games made per event. Almost every time we ran an event, and I want to say we doubled that, and just like I think we did it just like around 5,000. I don't have the data handy, but we saw like incredible growth just suddenly because people didn't know where to go. Like there was no longer these conferences to attend, and okay, we're a thing. So I'm like, okay, let's run with that and see where it takes us. And I know that's where I'm at now. I'm like, okay, we now matter. Like the sort of thing we do, creating online spaces for folks to do something together, to not so much socialize, but just kind of be part of something. And I'm like, okay, now what do we do now? There's certainly for me a sense of like, okay, oops, what do we do? But it's very exciting. For those of us that do online stuff, it's very exciting.
It's because of that, because we have online, I don't think we feel isolated. We kind of live a lot of our lives online. We email, we have social feeds, we communicate online, we work online. We're part of that connection now. So I don't think anyone who's in that vein does feel isolated. I know everyone's expecting to say, oh, it's been really tough and I can't get out and meet people, but I'm a busy chap. There's only so much time I'll allocate to frivolous chat before then I go on and actually do some real work. So it's actually convenient for me.
Bob, I think he's talking about us.
I know he's talking about us.
that frivolous chat comes with benefits, so I allow that. Right? But the main purpose of conventions is to increase your knowledge, to reconnect with what's going on, different perspectives, and you come back refreshed, re-energized, and ready to take on the next set of challenges. And that's the best part, that you can actually meet up, and then it becomes real. There's certainly this viscerality about meeting people in the flesh and seeing people's faces in web broadcasts. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of more online experiences that make us feel, connected. And I don't feel in the slightest bit isolated. I think it works quite well for me being locked up in a single room, forced to work 20 hours a day. I get a lot done. But yeah, now I've been denied it. Now it's been taken off me. I'm kind of really looking forward to getting outside again. I think the first conference, I will be there. I'll be there in this.
Right. I think we're all itching for that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that's fantastic. You guys have made it work. Mike, you've become the expert, or you've been the expert at digital and online. So that's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys again. So we got just 2 more questions. This will be simple, and we can wrap this up. But just want to give your sense of, you guys have been in the industry for a long time. You've worn various hats in being in the game ecosystem. Any thoughts of where it's going, or is everything just the same? It's just the tools are better, the computers are faster, but any insights on where you think things are going with game dev?
In the future.
I have to contain my answer, really, because I see the future very clearly, actually.
Okay.
And it's exciting times. I mean, the digitization of everyone's lifestyle is just going at a rampant pace, And right now, we're surrounded by stuff that make our lives easier. Everything from getting up in the morning to doing our work to exercising and eating well, and all that kind of stuff is wrapped up in this sort of huge ecosystem, all driven by what we've created over the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. And exciting to see how far we've come, and even more exciting to see how that can project into the future. I know that's not specifically in the little bubble of gaming, but it's in that little bubble of gaming where all the really clever people are going to help all of the rest of the world create these wonderful futures. Because it's sort of like trial by fire. To write a game is one of the hardest things you can do if you had to write it all, right? You've got to make sure that it looks good, it plays good, it runs fast, it's correct on different platforms. All of these things have to be considered. So you have to learn all these skills. And then once you have those skills, they apply perfectly to everybody else's problems. So that's how I see the future unfolding. We're going to be a central figure in helping the future create all of these innovations. As we increasingly move to electronic cars, driverless cars, flying taxis, all of these things at its kernel will be games developers creating this stuff. It's not necessarily a good thing when I say that in 2021, because how many bugs are you planning to put in that flying taxi, by the way? How far do you think I'll get before I crash into something? Sure. Right. But I think that's where it's going, and we're right in the middle of it. I mean, I'm young enough now that I'm going to see all of these advances and maybe play a small role in developing them. So that's what I'm seeing of the future. And I'm looking forward to it. I think what's lacking is the schools aren't producing enough geeks, so we can actually create the army we're going to need to get enough done.
Right.
It's all possible. We just need people to actually fill those roles to get it done quicker.
Academy. Right.
Geek Academy.
Right. Yeah, you gotta produce more geeks. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, what I kind of see is that games, we always follow what's interesting, what's emerging. So if there's a new platform, if there's a new something, we'll find a way to be part of it. That's just kind of what we do, and we're there to often make it better, and that's just kind of like our flow of things. But I think the big thing that we're seeing now is because now so many industries, or rather so many jobs are now changing to require the internet. We were kind of sort of not doing it. We had the internet, so you would send an email at work and whatnot. It was still very much the same old business world before, but it's a little bit more digitized. The situation in the world right now has forced every industry to say, okay, what do we really need? What is our essential to function? Like one interesting example I came across recently was that there's this this concept of ghost kitchens. So like you could literally run a restaurant and not actually have a location. Because of you're the DoorDash and these delivery apps, you could order a certain restaurant and the restaurant may not exist. It might just be this white label kitchen that makes food for these 3 different places.
Yeah.
Like the things are changing in such a basically things have accelerated. I think the needs or the what we can do with the internet has really sped up. Like things that we probably would have expected to become a big deal outside of Silicon Valley, because of course all this stuff happens in Silicon Valley like before it reaches the rest of the world. But like in my hometown in the middle of Canada, like a small good sized city, we have this ghost kitchen thing going on. So it's like we can order from a restaurant that doesn't actually exist, and this sort of like a connection to the internet, I think, is just accelerating super fast. Like I don't know what that necessarily means for us as game makers, other than we better be on our ball game, like on our game, and making sure that we're taking advantage of our opportunities there. But it's like the internet. If the internet wasn't a big deal before, it's absolutely is now.
Yeah, just to add to that, talking about how new technology comes in, that does apply to the games industry. So VR being a great example. It's not like we can just take what we had and just stick it in VR. It didn't work. What we had to do was sort of pull it back down to the ground and say, right, look at the hardware, look at the platform, and create something for that. And that's brand new. That's new stuff that we can get our teeth into. Can you imagine what's next after VR? The new ways in which we can have games and experiences to interact with us biologically in order to create that. I mean, these are exciting times. Biotech, yes.
Holodeck.
Actually, Bob, do you mind if I throw?
Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
So obviously the pandemic, all very bad. Not trying to make light of it in any way, but there's that expression, every cloud silver lining. If you really think about it, right? And Mike's a great example. He shared the number that he was hitting 2,000 or 3,000 for the longest time, and then suddenly there's this huge spike. And I think if there is any small, tiny sliver out of this pandemic, is that video games are just becoming more popular, right? We've seen all kinds of news stories that for the industry, PC sales were up, the graphic card makers can't keep stuff in stock, the console makers can't keep stuff in stock. I think for our industry, one of the great things about this is, because we talked about the 80s and our cassettes and all that, right? We used to be called geeks, nerds, and it was kind of a shame thing. And now it's the label of pride, right? It's, you walk around in a gaming day, Minecraft t-shirt or whatever game of choice, and it's like, oh, dude, cool shirt, right? Where 20 years ago, I was like, dude, is that a video game shirt? You dweeb, right? And so I think that's the one thing I would throw out there in the future is video games have matured and evolved from this thing of this niche little segment of the population to basically everyone's a gamer, right? Numbers I've seen, if they look at the total, and it's a rough estimate because it's hard to nail down, there's about 2 billion PCs in the world. And best estimates, Newzoo was a particular source, right? They claim there's a 1.3 billion PC gamers. So that math works out to saying that 65% of the people that own a PC play games on it, right? And obviously you have your phones and consoles, and there's all other kinds of ways to play games. So what I'm saying is, to me, the one great thing about the future I see is that games has grown from this little nerdy sub pie of the population to just like movies. Who doesn't watch movies? Now you may like different movies. You like horror, you like comedy, whatever. But everyone watches movies of one sort or another. And I think that's one of the big things about the future of video games is everyone's going to be a gamer.
Yeah,
and that's just good for the whole industry.
Remember the milestone where the games industry overtook the music industry
20 years ago?
And
yeah.
You'd think, I mean, how does that happen? I mean, we're bigger than the biggest musician, rock band, etc. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool.
The latest numbers I saw, right? The hundreds of billions of dollars spent on gaming, the whole enchilada, exceeded all major pro sports.
Yes.
Right? All of them. All the movie box office and the entirety of the music industry. Effectively, if you think of all forms of entertainment, right, besides Dungeons and Dragons, gaming is better than is bigger numerically, revenue-wise, bigger than all the other forms of entertainment in mankind put together. So yeah.
Yeah, it's quite
There you
big.
go.
Mhm.
It could be the next rock.
Yeah, and
couldn't we?
I think this goes to what you guys are saying is whatever technology that is coming forward, it's being incorporated by gamers and the game industry. So, you know, multiplayer online, video streaming, audio streaming, that's just old hat for gaming. And so suddenly the rest of the world is discovering this. It's like, wow, Zoom's great. Well, we've had Discord and there's been Twitch and there's all these other things that people have been doing. And so yeah, it's impressive how the game industry is kind of at the center of everything. It seems to be everything is consolidating in terms of entertainment around gaming or some variant of. And then a last question for you guys is obviously Eric and I work for Intel. You're Intel software innovators. Is there a role that you see that Intel has in helping shape this future, the future for gaming, the future of technology?
Mike, do you want to start off? Because if I start talking, you might not be able to shut me up.
I've got the mute button ready for you, Lee.
And Eric's going to take
ready to
notes,
go.
by the way.
Arms and ready. Okay. I think what Intel is, I think Intel's actually doing a good job of, there's kind of a two sides to this.
Mm-hmm.
I think Intel is doing great in that they're trying to help people, do something with this technology. Because Intel is a name that a lot of people trust for who do you go to learn about computer stuff? Well, Intel's actually is in a great position to do that. Kind of in the same way that us, Ludum Dare, if you want to learn how to make a game, we're potentially a great place to learn how to do that. Although admittedly, that's something we are in the process of doing a better job at. But there's these names and brands out there that are good at, or at least when you try to think of who's the authority on these things, Intel was a great one for technology. We're maybe a good one for making games. And I think the more that we all can do to help people get into it that say don't know where to start. I think that's the biggest thing for a lot of people is just knowing how to start, knowing where to start. And the more we can do to assist that, to help that, to do whatever we can so that more people can be involved, it's better for everyone. Because the sooner we all get on the internet and on running our businesses, running our online services and stuff, and it's just it's the norm, then that it better is for everyone. If I can get lunch just by pushing a few buttons on my phone, which I can these days, that's amazing. This is the future that we all dreamed of in science fiction and whatnot. It's it's there. We just have to do it. We have to make it.
Right, I agree with Mike. I think Intel are already off to a great start. Have created a system and an ecosystem that starts with the hardware and then brings developers through all the way through to market. And I've been lucky enough to see these components all working together. So it's not like you have to sort of, right, what are we going to do and start from scratch? You're already doing a great job. Obviously, developers always want more. We always want the next thing. I mean, that's what kind of gets us up in the morning. But I don't think it's anything new. I think what it will be is just more of the same in those areas where it needs more. For example, let's say I'm using Intel integrated GPUs in order to create a graphics engine, and it needs to be fast. Now, I'm okay at optimizing, but Intel is better. If I can somehow get that knowledge and get that expertise to help me make my game faster, that would be great, because then I get a great product and Intel get a product that runs great on that technology. So that's a perfect example. Another one is more guides. Intel produce a lot of tools for analyzing CPUs and GPU performances. But it'd be great if there was lots of guidance on it, case studies, examples, tutorials, just so much information so we become experts at that tool. Because sometimes when you get a tool and it does a lot of things, it's quite overwhelming. It's like, oh, which of the 15,000 buttons do I press first? But a lot of information on that will help them use the tools. And then the last thing, which I'd like to see more of, is Intel also have great taps into the industry on the consumer side, which is basically where us developers want to sell our products to. And Intel can identify those markets, tell us this is the next thing that's coming. You really need to train up in this because that's the next thing. And then get developers on that roadmap so they can start selling not just 100 or 1,000 units of whatever they've made, but tens and hundreds and millions of units of what they've made. That would be a great sort of result for Intel's involvement with the developer. And like I said, that's already happening, but it's just a case of doing more of these good things and perhaps making developers more aware of these offerings these benefits, and just carrying on what you're doing, because I think you're doing a great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, admittedly, I think that's another point too, is that what you're probably doing better is telling people that Intel is doing all this stuff, because I'm aware of this because I communicate with Intel, and I'm familiar with what Intel is up to. But in the small niche corners of the developer internet, the small guy is not really familiar with what Intel is doing and what Intel can do to support and to make things better for them. And that's my fault. I should be doing more. People in my position running similar events should be doing more to be able to spread the word that you guys are there and you want to help the little guy out. And my bad.
We can all do a better job.
Put it on put it on DevMesh. That's what
I was going to say. The small little tiny commercial there, right, is the easiest way for any indie developers to start the engagement is we have a website, devmesh.intel.com, devmesh.intel.com, and it's completely open to the public. It's free to join, free to publish. There's no cost whatsoever. And you can put up your projects, even if your projects are just a concept. You can put them up there. We've got a game development site. You can market as a game and get that process started. And it's great for recognition if you're a small developer. So, small little commercial. Sorry, Bob.
No, perfect. DevMesh is great.
Just to add to that, this is the non-sponsored addition to that, is you can drill down. Once you find a project you're interested in, you can literally drill down on the developer's written technical information about what made that, the tools that we use, the techniques that we use, and it brings it closer to, I could do that. If you can see how it's done, that's just a regular guy or gal who's created that. I could do that. And it kind of gives you a starting point if you wanted to do something similar, whether it's a tool or an app for your hat or a game or whatever it is. You can get the inside track of how that project got to that point. So it's really useful to sort of get that whole picture, not just the screenshots.
Yeah, it is. And we should be clear, it's a community-driven site. So essentially almost all the content, there's some Intel content down there. It's from the developers and what they're doing. It's a great resource. And I'm surprised that we're not on DevMesh right now.
we should make a confession. Bob and I are a huge fan of the show Letterkenny.
Right.
And so, I can't believe we're not off on DevMesh right now.
We're not on DevMesh right now. That's an inside joke that we have. Props to Letterkenny.
Nice.
To be fair. Great show. Obviously, our Canadian friend here is probably a fan of Letterkenny. You better be, Mike. It's a great show.
Yes. I am a fan of this show.
Very good. Well, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for coming out. This was a great conversation, great insights for all of us into what got you started into game dev and how it's all working for you. I'm going to remind the viewers, if you like the content, please hit the like button and or the subscribe button to this YouTube channel. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go on YouTube, but we'll figure that out. But whatever channel it is that's having this show, subscribe to it. But you know what? Let's leave on a fun note. So, Eric, maybe you could leave us with a joke.
Right. So, in the spirit of our new show, here's a question for you. Did you hear about the two bits that walked into a bar? They joined their 6 friends for a bite. It takes a moment. It's easy when you read it, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's the show. So between 2 bites. Okay, that wraps our show. Thanks for our guest. Thanks, Eric, for joining. So everybody, I'm Bob Duffy. This is Eric Mantion. These are our wonderful guests. And we'll see you next time.
Ciao.